Hello, hello, and welcome back, my friends. I hope you all are having a good day. Today, we will be going over another spooky story, as I said in my previous video. We are going to be going over Grettir the Strong against Glamr the Undead Draugr. Now, I wanted to talk about a couple of things before we get into the story. First, I want to let you guys know a little bit more about Glamr before he was unfortunately killed and turned into a Draugr. You see, a man named Thorhall was having trouble keeping any kind of farm work. Anybody who he hired wouldn't finish out their actual terms. They wouldn't complete the job, and they would just kind of vanish. So Thorhall went to Skafti and asked for, any suggestions. Skafti was a very good lawmaker, or a law speaker, in Athing, and Skafti told him that there must be evil beings at work if you are having this much trouble with the farmhands, and suggested that they provide him with a shepherd by the name of Glam, who hails from Silgasdalir in Sweden. Sorry, it's Silgasdalir. Anyway, so, because this man was brave, he was big, he had silver white hair, or snow white hair, and he had wide blue eyes, and he wasn't afraid of anything, nor was he a very superstitious man. So, when talking to Thorhall about his job, Glam said he was easily capable of looking after the sheep in the winter. "Will you look after my sheep?" Thorhall asked. "Skafti put you into my charge. I'll be most useful to you. If I am left to do as I please, because I have a bad temper when I don't like something..." Yeah, he mentions he's got a short temper. "I won't suffer for that," said Thorhall. "And I want you to come to me." "I can do that," said Glam. "Are there any problems?" "It is supposed to be haunted," said Thorhall. "I am not afraid of ghouls," said Glam. "It makes it more interesting." "Those are the qualities you'll need," said Thorhall. "And it helps if you're not exactly puny either." So, Glam does his job, and he does it very well through the spring and summer seasons. But when it came time for Christmas Eve, Glam got up that day and called out for food. The farmer's wife answered, "It is not the Christian custom to eat on this day, because tomorrow is the first day of Christmas. Is it our duty to fast today?" Glam replied, "You have all sorts of superstitions I dismiss as worthless. People don't strike me as being any better off now than they were in the days that they didn't practice such things. I prefer the way people were when they were called heathens. I just want my food, and I don't want any tricks." The farmer's wife said, "I know that you'll suffer for it today if you go ahead with this evil act." Glam told her to bring some food immediately, otherwise she would be the worse off. She dared not disobey him, and when he had eaten his fill, he went outside in a rather stormy mood, as one does after having an argument about trying to eat before going to work. It was dark and snow was falling. The weather was stormy and grew much worse as the day progressed. People heard the shepherd early in the day, but less as the day wore on. Then the snow began to drift. In the evening there was a blizzard. Everyone went to mass and night fell, but Glam did not return home. The idea of going out and looking for him was suggested, but because of the raging blizzard and pitch darkness, no search was made. He did not return on Christmas Eve, and everyone waited until Mass was over. When it was fully daylight, the people set off to make search and found sheep scattered among the snowdrifts, thrown around by the storm. Some had fled to the mountains, then they had found a huge trampled area around the head of the valley, which looked as if a mighty skirmish had taken place there, because rocks and soil had been torn up in many places. They looked more closely and saw Glam laying in a short distance away. He was dead, black as charcoal and bloated to the size of a bull. Although they repulsed and shuddered at the sight of him, they tried to carry him to the church, but could only manage to move him as far as the edge of a chasm a short way above them. Having done this, they went home and told the farmer about the incident. Thorhall asked what could have caused Glom's death, and they said they had traced some footprints which were as large as if a barrel had been slammed down in the snow, and they led up from the trampling ground to the crag at the head of the valley. Splashes of blood ran alongside them. They concluded that the evil being, which was there before, had killed Glom, but he must have dealt it a mighty fatal blood wound, because no one has ever been aware of it since. On the second day of Christmas, another attempt was made to take Glom's body to the church. Oxen and horses were tethered to it, but could not budge it on flat ground, where there was no slope to go down. After that, the body was left there. On the third day, the priest went with them, and they searched all day, but could not find Glom. The priest did not want to search again, and the shepherd was found when the priest was not with them. They gave up trying to take him to the church and buried him in a shallow grave where he was. Of course, that is a really bad idea for someone who was kind of killed by so horrendously and ended up horrendously. Shortly afterwards, people became aware that Glom was not resting in peace. He wrought such havoc that some people fainted at the sight of him, while others went out of their minds immediately after Christmas. People thought they saw him at the farm, and were so terrified that many of them fled. After that, Glom started straddling the roof at night until it was nearly smashed to pieces. Then his ghost roamed around day and night. Even the people with ample reasoning for going into the valley hardly dared venture there. The local people thought it was a terrible plague. In the spring, Thorhall took on some new farmhands and began farming again. The hauntings waned when the days were the longest, and the time passed until midsummer. A ship arrived in Hunavaten. That summer, there was a man named Thorgout on board, a big, powerful foreigner with the strength of 2 men. He was on his own and had not tied himself down anywhere, but wanted to find some kind of work because he had no money. Thorhall rowed down to the ship and met with Thorgout and asked if he wanted to go and work for him. Thorgout said he might as well do so, adding that he was not particular about what he did. "You ought to prepare yourself for something that's not fit for weaklings to do," Thorhall said. "Because of the ghosts that have been haunting this place, I don't want to deceive you about that." Thorgold answered, "I won't be giving up just because I see a little ghoul. No one else will be comfortable there if it scares me. I won't leave the job on account of that." They struck a bargain, and Thorgout was appointed to watch over the sheep during the winter. Summer passed, and Thorgout took charge of the sheep during the winter nights. Everybody liked him. Glom kept coming to the house and straddling the roof. Thorgout was quite amused at this, and said that the wretch would have to come closer before I get scared of him. Thorhall told him to keep to himself. "It's better if you don't put your strength to the test." Sorry, let me repeat that. "It's better if you two don't put your strength to the test." Thorgout answered, "You definitely had the courage shaken out of you, but stories like that won't finish me off overnight." Winter passed and Christmas came around. On Christmas Eve, the shepherd went to tend to the sheep. The farmer's wife said, "It would be better if the old story did not repeat itself, I feel." "Don't worry about that, lady," he replied. "Something worth telling will have to happen if I don't come back." Then he went back to tend to the sheep. The weather was fairly cold and the snow was drifting heavily. Thorgout was accustomed to come back at twilight, but on this occasion, he did not return at that time. People returned from Mass as usual and thought the events would follow in a similar pattern. The farmer wanted to mount and search for the shepherd. but the people who had returned from Mass argued against it, saying that they would not risk being snatched away by trolls at night. The farmer did not have the resolve to go alone, so nothing came of it. After they had eaten on Christmas Day, they went out to search for the shepherd. They went to Glom's first grave, expecting him to be responsible for the shepherd's disappearance. A terrible sight greeted them when they approached the grave, for they found the shepherd there, his neck broken and every bone in his body crushed. They took him to the church, and Thorgot caused them no harm afterwards. Glom, however, redoubled his efforts, and caused so much trouble that everyone fled from Thorhallstadir, apart from the farmer and his wife. The same cowherd had been there for a long time. Thorhall did not want him to leave because he was a kindly man who looked after the cattle well. He was very advanced in years and reluctant to go, for he realized that all the farmer's livestock would be ruined if no one tended to it. One morning after midwinter, the farmer's wife went to the milking shed to milk the cows as usual. It was fully daylight then, for no one dared to go outside before then apart from the cowherd, who would go out as soon as it started to grow light. She could hear the great crashing noise inside the shed and a mighty bellowing, and ran back indoors screaming that she had no idea what awful deeds were being done in there. The farmer went out, and when he came to the bulls, they were butting each other. He was disturbed by this sight and went into the barn. He saw his cowherd lying on his back with his head in one stall and his feet in another. The farmer went to him and felt him and realized at once that he was dead. His back had been broken over the stone wall dividing the stalls. Thorhall thought it was not safe to stay here any longer, and left the farm, taking with him everything he could. Glom killed all the livestock that was left behind, then went over the valley and laid waste to the farms inland from Tunga. Thorhall stayed with friends for the rest of the winter. No one could venture into the valley with horses or dogs because the animals were killed on the spot. When spring arrived, and the days were at their longest, the hauntings waned somewhat, and Thorhall wanted to return to his land. Although it was not easy for him to find farm hands, he started farming at Thorhallstadir again. But the same thing happened. When autumn came around, the hauntings increased. The farmer's daughter was the main victim, and in the end, it led to her death. They tried everything imaginable to stop the hauntings, but nothing worked. Everyone thought the whole of Vatnsdal Valley would be left uninhabited if nothing were done. To return to Grettir Asmundarson, he stayed at home at Bjarg in the autumn, after he had left Killer Bardi at Thori Youngurnir. Just before the winter nights, Grettir rode north over the ridges to Vidadal. That's literally how it's spelled, Vididal. Vidadal. And stayed at Understadir. He and Audun had made a full reconciliation. Reconciliation. Grettir gave him a fine axe, and they pledged each other on their friendship. Audun lived at Audurstadir for a time, and they had made many descendants. His son was a Gil who... Oh, hold up, gotta read dialogue. Julius. I'm fine, don't worry. What, you done already? So much for the legendary Belmont. Talk all you want. Hey, punk. Looks like I can get me a little payback from ya. But I'm not at full power just yet. The throne chamber on the top floor. You were heading there, weren't you? That's where we'll settle the scores once and for all. Watch it. He's tough, especially for me since I can't use magic seals. Hold on, Julius. You can't use magic seals? Uh-huh. What about it? Well, didn't you run into monsters that you couldn't destroy? No, I destroyed them before they could reconstitute. They weren't a problem. But this time, I don't think that'll work. You've got to be joking. That should have been impossible. Forget about me. You can go home. I'll be fine. He's expecting me. I'll be on my way. Watch out for his fire attacks, but you can do it. Don't disappoint me. Got it. Okay, back to the story. As we were saying, Agil, who married Ulfid, the daughter of Enjolf Gudmundarson, their son Eyjolf, who was killed at the Althing, was the father of Jorm, chaplain to Bishop Thorlok. Grettir rode north to Vatnsdal and paid visit to Tonga. Jokul Bardason, his maternal uncle, was living there at the time. Jokul was a big, strong man and exceptionally arrogant. He was a merchant and a very good overbearing, but a man of many gifts. He welcomed Grettir, who stayed with him for 3 nights. Glam's haunting had become so notorious that people hardly talked about anything else. Grettir asked in detail about all the incidents that have taken place. Jokul said the stories were no exaggeration. Would you be curious about looking in there, kinsman? Grettir said he would. Jokul told him not to, for this is a great test of fortune and you are an important man in your family. We do not consider any other young man a match for you, but evil begets evil as far as Glam is concerned, and it's much better to tackle human beings than such evil beings. Grettir said he was interested in calling at Thorhallstadir and seeing how things were there. Jokul said, I can see there's no point in trying to dissuade you, but the saying is true, and that fate and fortune do not always go hand in hand. Peril waits at a man's door, though another goes in before, said Grettir. You should consider what fate you yourself will meet in the end. Jokul replied, We both may have some insight into the future, but neither of us can prevent it from happening. After that, they parted ways, and neither were pleased with the other's predictions. Grettir rode to Thorhallstadir, and the farmer welcomed him warmly. He asked Grettir where he was heading, and the farmer was pleased when he replied that he wanted to stay there for the night. Thorhall said he was grateful that Grettir had come, for there weren't many people who feel they stand to gain from staying here at present. You must have heard of the tricks being played here, and I wouldn't like you to have any trouble on my account. Even if you leave here in one piece, I'm certain that you will lose your horse, because no one who comes here manages to keep his horse unhurt. Grettir said that horses were easy to come by. Whatever might happen to this one... Oh, man, I said that all wrong. Thorhall was pleased that Grettir wanted to stay and welcomed him with open arms. Grettir's horses were firmly locked indoors. Then they went to sleep, and the night passed without Glam turning up. Then Thorhall said, Things have changed for the better since you arrived. because Glom usually rises every night, plays havoc on the roof, and breaks down the doors, as you can see for yourself. Grettir said, either he will not bide his time much longer, or he will give up for more than a single night. I'll stay another night and see what happens. Then they went to inspect Grettir's horse, which had not been touched. The farmer thought everything was pointing in the same direction. Grettir stayed a second night. The wretch did not return, and the farmer thought the outlook was much more promising. Then he went to inspect Grettir's horse. The stable had been broken into when he arrived, and the horse had been dragged outdoors with every bone in its body broken. Thorhall told Grettir what the situation was and told him not to leave, because you're a dead man if you wait for Glom. Grettir answered, A glimpse of that wretch is the least I can ask in return for my horse. The farmer said he would gain nothing by seeing Glom, for he is different from any human form, but I feel better for every hour you are willing to stay here. The day passed, and at bedtime Grettir did not get undressed, but lay down on the bench facing the farmer's bed closet. He covered himself with a shaggy fur cloak, tucked one end under his feet and the other behind his head so that he could see out through the opening at the neck. In front of the seat was a very strong bed frame, and he braced his feet against it. The frame had been smashed right away from the door to the house, and some makeshift boards had been put in its place. The partition which had separated the hall from the entranceway had been broken away too, both and below the crossbeam. All the beds had been shifted, and the place was hardly fit for habitation. A light was left burning in the living room that night. About a third of the way through the night, Grettir heard a great din outside. Something had climbed up onto the house and sat astride of the roof of the hall, kicking against it with its heels so that every piece of timber in the house creaked. This went on for a long time. Then it climbed down from the roof and went to the door. When the door opened, Grettir watched the wretch stick its head inside, which looked hideously big with grotesque features. Glom moved slowly and stood up straight once he was through the door. He towered up to the rafters, turned to the hall, rested his arm on the crossbeam, and glowered inside. The farmer did not make a sound, for he had already had quite enough of just hearing what went on outside. Grettir lay there, completely still. When Glom noticed something lying in a heap on the seat, he moved along inside the hall and gave the cloak a sharp tug. Grettir braced his feet against the bed frame and did not yield. Glom yanked it again, much harder, yet the cloak would still not budge. A third time he tugged, so hard that with both his hands that he sat Grettir up on the bench, and they ripped the cloak in two between them. Glom looked at the strip he was left holding, astonished that someone could tug so hard against him. At that moment, Grettir ducked under Glom's arms and clutched it around his waist, squeezing against his backbone with all his might, and hoping of toppling him. But the wretch gripped Grettir's arm so tightly that he was forced to yield his grip. Grettir backed away into one seat after another. All the benches were torn loose and everything in their way was smashed. Glom tried to make it to the door while Grettir struggled for a foothold. Eventually, Glom managed to drag him out of the hall. A mighty fight ensued because the wretch intended to take him outside of the farmhouse, but difficult as Glom was to deal with indoors, Grettir saw it would be even harder to handle outdoors, so he struggled with all his might to stay inside. Glom's strength redoubled, and he clutched Grettir towards him when they reached the entrance hall. When Grettir realized he could not hold him back, in a single move he suddenly thrust himself as hard as he could into the wretch's arms and pressed both feet against a rock that was buried in the ground at the doorway. The wretch was caught unawares, and As he had been straining to put Grettir toward him, Glom tumbled over backwards and crashed through the door. His shoulders took the door frame with him, and the rafters were torn apart. The wooden roofing and the frozen turf on it, and Glom fell out of the house on to his back facing upwards, with Grettir on top of him. The moon was shining strongly, but the thick patches of clouds covered and uncovered in its terms. Just as Glom fell, the clouds drifted away from the moon, and Glom glared up at it. Grettir himself has said that this was the only sight that ever unnerved him. Suddenly Grettir's strength deserted him from exhaustion, but also because of the fierce way Glom was rolling his eyes. Unable to draw his sword, he lay there on the brink of death. Glom was endowed with more evil force than most other ghosts. As he spoke words, "You have gone to great lengths to confront me, Grettir," he said, "and it won't seem surprising if you do not earn much good fortune from me. I can tell you that I have attained half the strength and manhood allotted to you and you had not encountered me. I cannot take away from you the strength you already have achieved, but I can ordain that you will never become any stronger than you are now. Strong enough as you may be, many people will find out to their cost. You have become renowned until now for your deeds, but henceforth outlawry and killings will fall to your lot, and most of your deeds will bring you misfortune and improvidence. You will be made an outlaw and forced to live alone and outdoors, and this curse I lay on you. My eyes will always be before your sight, and this will make you find it difficult to be alone, and this will lead to your death." As the wretch finished saying this, the helplessness that had come upon Grettir wore off. He drew his short sword, chopped off Glom's head, and placed it against his buttocks. Then the farmer came outside, having dressed while Glom delivered his speech. He had not dared approach until Glom had been felled. Thorhall praised God and thanked Grettir kindly for having him overcome this evil spirit. They set and burnt Glom to ashes, and then carried them in a sack bag and buried them as far away as possible from grazing land or paths. After that, they went back home. It was close to dawn by then. Grettir laid down, for he was very stiff. Thorhall had people sent from the neighboring farms in order to show and tell them what had happened. Everyone who heard of this exploit was greatly impressed by it, and said that in all of Iceland no man was matched for Grettir Asmundarson in strength, courage, and all accomplishments. Thorhall sent Grettir on his way with generous gifts, giving him a good horse and a splendid clothes, because those he had been wearing were all ripped to shreds. They parted in friendship. Grettir rode off as in Vatnsdal, where Thorvald welcomed him warmly and asked in detail about his encounter with Glom. Grettir told him about the dealings and said that he had never before been through such a test of strength, so long that they had grappled together. Thorvald told him to keep his temper in check, and everything will turn out well otherwise. You will be prone to misfortune. Grettir said that his temperament had not improved, and that he had such trouble restraining himself, and was much quicker to take offense than before. He noticed a marked difference that he had grown so afraid of the dark that he did not dare go anywhere alone after nightfall. He thought he could see all kinds of phantoms. It has since become a saying about people who suffered hallucinations that Glom lends them his eyes, and they see things with Glom's eyes. Grettir rode home to Bjarg, when he had finished his business, and stayed there for the rest of the winter. In the autumn, Grettir went north to Vatnsdal. Thorbjorn Ox held a great feast with many people attended. Thorbjorn Traveler was at the feast. The guests talked about many things, and the people of Hurtafjord asked about the clash with Grettir and by the ridge that summer. Thorbjorn Ox gave a good account of Grettir and said Cormac would have him come off the worse if no one had intervened to separate them. Then Thorbjorn Traveler said, "There were two things. I didn't see Grettir perform any brave deeds, and if anything, I think it gave him a shock when we arrived, and he said was quite happy to have the quarrel broken up. Nor did I see him try to take vengeance when Atle's farmland was killed. I don't think Grettir has any courage if he lacks the force of numbers." Thorbjorn was very sarcastic about this. Many people there said that these were empty jabs that Grettir certainly would not stand, or jibes that Grettir certainly would not stand for if he heard about them. Nothing else noteworthy happened at the feast, and everyone went home. There was a lot of friction between the two sides that winter, but neither attacked the other. Nothing else noteworthy happened that winter. And with that, we have concluded to the attacking of Glam and Grettir the Strong. And as I said before in a lot of my Senua Saga videos, Draugr can have many after effects on you regardless if you defeat them or not. As you heard Glam's final words, he was bestowing upon him hallucinations, horrors of the dark, and even cursed him to be an outlaw, which is looking like it's already starting to happen, but we're focusing more on the fact that the evil spirits accumulated, I guess, or became an amalgamation with Glam for how big and strong he was, to turn him into such a troll-looking creature that not even a man with the strength of two men and tall as, that towered over normal people could take. But as Grettir the Strong was of course known for his strident strength, that he managed to take out the creature, but unfortunately before he could end it, he was cursed. And thus ends the victory and defeat of Grettir the Strong against Glam the Draugr. I do hope you guys enjoyed the story, and there will be more to come, but not so soon, not so quick. Probably play a couple games with my actual reactions and, having fun all over again. So, until next time, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful month, a happy Hallows Eve, Samhain, soon the Day of the Dead, and whatever other kind of respect for the dead days that we have in the world. And until next time, guys, I will see you all very soon, my friends.